The Eevee rendering engine is wonderful. It's full featured, it's rich, it's got a wonderful, wonderful deep tool set. However, the Cycles rendering engine just has some features that the Eevee rendering engine just doesn't have. We've been looking at a lot of those today. The physically based rendering and the indirect and global illumination inside of Cycles is wonderful, and there are a couple other features in Cycles that we just don't find and see in Eevee. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do want to show you some rock stars, ones that are really important for you, and things that have definitely changed my understanding of what's available and how we put our models together. So I'm working on my blacksmith shop here, and I've used the geometry node system to go ahead and create all the roof tiles for me automatically. And I'm ready to start going in and assigning some materials for them. But I don't want to go in, there's a bunch of them. I don't want to go in and individually assign the materials for every single roof tiles. I want them to have small variations in color when compared to one to another. Now, using the Eevee rendering engine, this is kind of the extension of what we get, just one color. The computer or this rendering engine is not sophisticated enough to be able to tell the difference between each of the geometric islands. Cycles is, though. Check this out. This is pretty cool. Let's change our rendering engine over into Cycles, and voila, I already have the material set up, but this is what it looks like. Let me go ahead and select it real fast so you can see it. So simply put, the magic comes in this geometry node right here. This is the node that Cycles can access. It can access all of this information, and I'm using the random per island. It's going through and it's looking for each individual discontiguous polygonal island and is automatically assigning it a color value. Well, what color value is it giving it? Well, it's giving it this color ramp, and I go in and tell it which colors to choose. And I made them pretty bright, bold colors so you guys can see exactly how this is all working together. And we assign the color here. We can even go in and maybe add a color by hitting the little plus sign. Let's do it real fast. So here's a new one. Let's just make it, oh, I don't know, yellow. Make it a bright yellow. That's kind of a darker one. There we go. That's pretty cool. And now it's automatically assigning them for me. Now, the distribution of these colors really kind of depends on where all these sliders exist. And this is just kind of a nice, fun way of going in and randomizing the colors of all the roofing tiles right here inside of Cycles, which is pretty great. The only thing that we've got to make sure that we change inside this color ramp node, which we've used many times in this course, is we've got to change the interpolation from linear to constant. That way it holds the color value until it hits this next keyframe, this one right here. So that's pretty neat. I like that about working inside of Cycles. Now, another thing that we only see inside of the Cycles rendering engine is a different sky texture. Right now, we're previewing the environment of our scene, and this is what it looks like. It's just kind of a gray space. If I was to look at the background, it's just a color. Okay. I can change that color, but I want to put a sky texture in there. I want to start flooding this environment with something that looks a little bit more photographic, not just a singular color, but a nice gradient of colors that happens in the background. Inside of my shader graph environment, let's change it from object over into world so we can actually physically see the nodes that are responsible for generating the background of our scene. And we're going to add in a sky texture. We've actually done this one other time, of course, across the course of this semester. Let's do it one more. Shift-A, you can find the sky texture in the texture section, and it is right there, which is wonderful. And of course, we're going to wire the color into the color node of the background, and poof, it automatically takes over. Previously, when we were working with Eevee, we experimented with the Pretum and the Hosk-Wilke algorithms. And these do okay jobs of starting to simulate a background sky environment. Here's the Pretum, and they get a nice little color, blue gradient that goes down to a nice kind of pinkish white here at the horizon line. And of course, playing around with the turbidity allows us to change the effects, and it's okay. Let's just say it's okay. It takes a lot of massaging of the values to get something that kind of works. Same with the other algorithm in here, the Husek-Wilke. This one's a little bit more in the realm of something that I would use pretty often, especially when we combine the ground albedo and the turbidity values in here. We can start to customize it. But the magical one is the Nishida, and the Nishida is only available in this Cycles rendering engine, and it's pretty cool. Now, I know on the surface here, it just looks really intense. That's because we have the sun directional light also turned on. We're going to turn that off and just use the sky texture as an HDRI map in the background of our scene to illuminate the contents of our environment. Now, what makes this so exciting are all the different parameters that we get to adjust inside of this area. Specifically, I want to start with the sun elevation. At the moment, it's 15 degrees up in the sky, and yes, we are actually simulating the angle of the sun in the sky. So let's bring this down. I'm going to bring it down to right about in here, and you can see that not only is it changing the elevation of the sun, but it's actually changing the color of the environment as the sun changes its orientation, which is pretty cool. Now, right now, my sun elevation value is negative. So if I bring this up just ever so slightly to a positive value, you should start to see something poking up at the horizon line right there. Yep, that's the sun. We actually get a solar disk in this algorithm, which is pretty cool. And now we can actually start to simulate an actual sunrise, which is pretty neat. Now, if we combine the sun elevation with the ozone values, like maybe we want to have a nice big blue sky, well, increasing the ozone is going to adjust the color of all that up there, as is the dust, which is going to simulate the amount of dust and air inside the environment. So we can change this as much as we want and get a really good, now it's really smoggy out. The environment is filled with dust and dirt. Yeah, look at the sun now. It looks red, as if it's coming up through the natural smog and pollution of our backgrounds. We can turn that off. We can increase and decrease the amount of air in our environment, which is actually responsible for refracting the moisture in the air, refracts the light around. It's just we have a lot of control here over how all this works. And if we zip around to the other side of my blacksmith shop and increase the sun elevation, how cool is that? Look at the shadows as they change their orientation as the sun rises across the sky. I think that's just really kind of neat and incredibly compelling. One final thing about this before we move on to the next one, if I bring this down a little bit, so we get our solar disk back. There it is. You can actually turn the sun disk on and off. Some people like to have it on and off. I like to have it on in this case because it's actually providing a wonderful illumination source for my building, which is pretty cool. In addition to changing the elevation, we can also change the rotation of the sun. So imagine we're spinning the Earth this way, which is pretty rad. We want the sun pointed that way. So we have a lot of control over our background with this algorithm and this sky texture, thanks to the wonderful magic of this Cycles rendering engine. There's one more that I want to show you that I think is pretty neat, and this completely changes the way I model because it allows me to blend surfaces together in a really cool way. Let me open up my good old vintage bike that we saw before. Here we go. This lovely project, and immediately I'm going to change the rendering engine over into Cycles. Let's jump into our shader graph environment here. Let's look at the actual render itself. And we're going to be looking at the material that's on the bike. And it actually currently does not have a material. Let's just give it a lovely, I don't know, kind of a tealy blue color somewhere right around in here. That might be kind of fun. And I want you to draw your attention to how I've constructed this bike itself. This bike was created with a whole series of curves that I made into geometry and extruded out their shapes. And this is a result. We can actually see where the curves intersect. These are two pipes that are just kind of stuck inside of each other. And you can see very clearly that transition. We can blend that transition through what's called a rounded edge or a bevel shader, and it's pretty neat. This is a Cycles only feature, and in my opinion, this is one of the reasons to hang out in Cycles because it's just really, really neat. Let's go ahead and add it into my shader graph here real fast. So I'm going to hit Shift-A. I'm going to search for bevel. And now this is not a vertex or edge beveling modifier that we would normally do to our geometry. This is a bevel shader, which is pretty great. Check this out. We're going to wire our bevel shader into the normal area of our principled BSDF. So right in here, these are going to go wonk like that. And now we need to experiment around with the radius. Let's see. I'm going to kind of get up in there real fast. I want to make some small movements here. Well, before we're going for this, increase the roughness or decrease the roughness, make it a little bit shinier. Maybe that will help us see how all this is working. It's not. Let's go the other direction on the roughness. That way we can see a little bit more clearly here how this is working. There's going to come a point when all of these edges are going to start to blend together. And it's going to round out and bevel across all these different islands. You have to mess around with the radius here. Let's see if I can find the value. Sometimes you got to go really high and really... Oh, I saw it flicker in and out there for a second. Yeah, I went too high. For mine in particular. Yeah, there it is. 1 or 0.10. And look, now it's starting to reduce and shade across that entire area, which is just really, really neat. Look at that. Here's with it off. You can clearly see the two pipes stuck together, but now we're shading across those two areas and we're beginning to blend it, which is pretty cool. This is called a rounded edge shader. See if I can just kind of dial it in. It's not entirely magical. You're not going to completely blend across it, but that's pretty good. Let's increase the samples a little bit. And that's hiding that transition just quite wonderfully from the viewing distance. And this is right about the viewing distance. Yeah, that's definitely having a big effect. Here's with it off. We turn it back on again, and it looks like there's two welded pipes. Since all of the pipes are sharing the exact same material, we're getting that exact same added benefit over here as well. See how it looks like it's just two pipes stuck together? And now when we shade across it with the bevel shader, it integrates it quite wonderfully. Now, it's not entirely magical. This is kind of a product of my modeling. These are two different curves that didn't line up quite perfectly. So it's not going to, fill the gaps, but it is going to shade across all these areas. And I think the results are pretty stellar. So this bevel or rounded edge shader is really, really neat. It allows us to create rounded edges over all of our objects without having to go in and do it geometrically, which is also pretty neat. Let's get this material a name real fast, and I'll show you one other idea on how we can use this rounded edge shader. And I'm actually going to add in a cube here. And on the cube, let's just create a new slot. And inside that slot, we're going to load that green material. Now look very carefully here. Check it out. See how it's rounding out the edges? Let's see if we can play around with the value here. Yeah, now you can see that's big. Yeah, look at that. It completely looks like this cube has been rounded out thanks to the awesomeness of the bevel shader, this rounded edge shader. I use this all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've done this exact same thing to blend different surfaces together. I do it all the time with text. Making rounded bevels on text can be quite a challenge. With this shader here, it makes it very, very easy. So those are 3 extra features that are only found inside the Cycles rendering engine. And I think that they're going to really enhance the quality of your work and just help you produce the most amazing models.